Imam al-Ghazali was the most learned scholar of his time, and he had the most prestigious position at the most prestigious university of his time. He was a master of fiqh. He was a master of usul al-fiqh. He was a master of aqidah. And then what does Imam al-Ghazali do? He says, I realize that me and many of those around me, we are just people of the dunya. We know the outward acts of the religion, we do all of this, but it just feeds our egos. People see us as these great scholars and all that, but we still have that ego. And what does Imam al-Ghazali do? He tells his university, he says, I'm going on sabbatical, I'm going for Hajj, I'll be back in a year. Imam al-Ghazali comes back after over 10 years. And the first place he goes to Damascus. And he goes to the Grand Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. And Imam al-Ghazali works as a janitor in that masjid. He's cleaning the masjid, he's cleaning the bathrooms, all of this stuff, with the idea of tasqiyah, with the idea that he wants to get rid of his nafs. And there's a beautiful story that in the masjid, somebody else is teaching one of Imam Ghazali's books in usul al-fiqh. And the professor is teaching the text, not realizing that the author of the text, who they all think mysteriously disappeared, is actually a janitor in the masjid. And it said that one day, two of the students after class are arguing about something in the text. So Imam Ghazali is working as the janitor, and at a certain point he can't take it anymore. He says, they don't understand what I'm actually trying to say. So he explains it to the two students. He says, you're not getting it right. What the author intended was this, and this. And one of the students says to him, he says, what do you know? You just clean the masjid. And then he goes to his teacher, and he says, the janitor in the masjid says this. And when the teacher hears this, he says, go find him, because he would only know that if he wrote this book. When Imam Ghazali hears this, he leaves Damascus and he goes to Jerusalem. And this is where Imam al-Ghazali writes his Ihya al-Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious sciences in Islam, which is the most important text in Tazkiyah. And subhanAllah, it's very beautiful. Imam Suyuti, he was asked, he said, what is the most important text for Muslims to study after the Qur'an? And he said, Imam Ghazali's Ihya al-Ulumuddin, which is about 40 books, and each of those books are 200 pages each. And Imam Abdullah ibn Adawi al-Haddad, he said he died in the year 1720, so he died about 300 years ago. Imam Abdullah ibn Adawi al-Haddad, he was in Yemen, and he said, I observed that people in the world, they don't read like they used to. So he said, I looked at Imam Ghazali's book on the shelf of the Ihya al-Ulumuddin, and I said, this is 40 books, 200 pages each. Most people will not read this amount of stuff in a lifetime. And he said, Imam Suyuti said, this is the most important book for Muslims to read after the Qur'an. So Imam al-Haddad summarized the Ihya al-Ulumuddin, each book into about 1 to 5 pages. And this is what is called the Book of Assistance. And this is a very important book that each and every single Muslim should have on their shelves. So the first obligation of every single Muslim is ilm, to seek knowledge. And the second obligation is tazkiyah, to purify oneself. And there is no tazkiyah without proper knowledge. And knowledge has not went beyond our throats if it doesn't lead for us to purify ourselves. And then the third obligation is to give da'wah. And many people, when we think of da'wah, we think of knocking on doors, we think about handing out pamphlets, we think about these sorts of things. But the true da'wah is the da'wah that when someone has fully purified themselves, whether they like it or not, they are going to give da'wah. There are some ulama that people, they are in the airports, and people just walk by them in the airports, and when they see them, they want to become Muslims. There's a famous story of Abdullah ibn Salam, who was a rabbi in Medina. He said, I looked at he said that they said that there was a man coming to Medina who claims that he's a prophet. And he said, as soon as I looked at the Prophet ﷺ, I knew that this man was a prophet. This is the da'wah of one's hal, the da'wah of one's inner state. And there's a very, very beautiful story of Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani. It said that when he was 14 years old, he left the village that he was in to go study in Baghdad, to study in Iraq. And his mother gave him some money, and she sewed the money in his clothes. And she said, my parting advice to you, my son, because I fear that after you go to the city, you will not come back and see me. Meaning that I will pass away by the time you come back home. She said, my parting advice to you is never lie to anyone. So it said that Imam Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani was going to Baghdad, and some robbers came up to him, and they said, do you have any money on you? And Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani said yes. So the robbers, they're searching his pockets, they're searching all of his clothes. They're saying, why are you telling us you have money? When we've searched all your pockets and everything, you don't have any money on you. And he says, it's over here, my mother sewed it in my clothes. So when the robbers hear this, he said, listen, we need to give you some advice. They said, why would you tell us that? And he said, because my mother told me to always be honest. And it said when the robbers heard this, they were so moved that they made tawbah and they left their lives of robbing. So Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani is not trying to get dawah. He's just someone with ilm who has purified himself. And there's a very beautiful story of the robbers. They stopped robbing and they decide they're going to protect the caravan. And the robber who robbed Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, he was fasting that day. Because he used to fast Mondays and Thursdays. And people used to ask him, if you were a thief, if you're doing all these major sins, stealing from people, why do you do these sunnah fasts? And he said that many people have strings that attach them to Allah. He said some people pray their salahs, some people do extra fasts, some people read Qur'an, some people make dhikr. He said, I don't have many strings that attach me to Allah. He said, fasting is that one string that attaches me, so if you see me doing it, don't make me take away that last string that I have from Allah. And it said that the robber later on, he would say, if I didn't do those Monday and Thursday fasts, I don't know if my heart would be in the condition that I would have repented upon hearing this young man say this. There's another very, very beautiful story. I did not meet this young man, but I came to Egypt 4 years ago. And the generation before me, one of my classmates from New Jersey, he said that he had an African American classmate who they asked him, they said, were you born Muslim? He said, no. They said, at what age did you become Muslim? He said, I was 8 years old when I became Muslim. And they said they were very confused. How does an 8-year-old make that decision? He said, my uncle, I think my father's brother, he was a Muslim, and I was so impressed by the character of my uncle. So he said, one day I was 8 years old, and I said to my uncle, I said, why are you such a good man? And my uncle said, in everything I do, I try to follow the Qur'an and the example of the Prophet ﷺ. I'm a good man because I'm a Muslim. So this 8-year-old, he says to his uncle, he said, I want to be Muslim too. So this 8-year-old, his parents were Christians, but they were perfectly happy with their 8-year-old son being Muslim, and they raised their child as a Muslim, and that young man ended up studying at law school. So this is the best form of dawah, just through our characters in and of itself. Hafiz Luqman, the one who just led us in Salah, is from Malaysia. Indonesia and Malaysia have some of the largest populations of Muslims in the world. How did these people become Muslim? It is said that there were business people from Yemen who came to these islands, and they were very honest and upright in the way that they did business. And when the locals saw the character of these business people, they said, why is it that in business you have every incentive to stretch the truth? You have every incentive to lie a little bit, exaggerate a little bit. Why are you guys so honest with us when you do business? And they said, because we follow a Prophet ﷺ who was a businessman, and he was known as the Sadiq al-Amin. He was known as the honest and upright, even before he was known as Rasulullah, even before he received revelation. And so they said, so because of that, they said, we try to follow an example, and the entirety of these islands became Muslim. Now Indonesia has more Muslims than anywhere else in the world. In my class in Ulster, it's like 30% Indonesians. When you go to Makkah and Medina, you see Indonesians everywhere. And why did these over 1 billion people become Muslim? Because these people were people of ilm and tazkiyah, and as a result of that dawah was natural. And the reason I am in Dallas is through an initiative between ICTA and the Oak Cliff Empowerment Center. Oak Cliff is in Dallas, it's not very far from here, but it is in many ways a different world. Most of the people in Oak Cliff have experienced violence. It is, I believe, the poorest zip code in all of Dallas. It is considered a food district, meaning that people there, even if they want to eat healthy food, it is not within that vicinity. And ICNA has a partnership with the Oak Cliff Empowerment Center, and there's Brother Mukas in the back has more information on that. And many of the people, so the Oak Cliff Empowerment Center really goes back to those three things. In the less than 2 years in which the center has been open, over 50 people have taken their shahada. And all 50 of those people, it's not like they took their shahada and they left and no one ever saw them again. The people at the Empowerment Center have a relationship with those people, have a relationship with those people's spouses, with their children, all of these sorts of things. So the Oak Cliff Empowerment Center, one role that it has is in doing weekly classes for new Muslims there and for people who are experiencing their Islam there. Another objective that it has is in helping get rid of some of the violence in the communities. So they have 4 or 5 employees in the community who are Muslims, who are from that community, and they engage in violence interruption, they engage in helping people with food delivery, with all of these sorts of things. And then the third objective, many of the people that are being helped in the community are new Muslims, many of them are non-Muslims. And many of the non-Muslims have actually become Muslim. And subhanAllah, I have been in that community for 3 days. There was someone that we met with the other day with regard to violence interruption. And the person that we met, we were talking to him about that. But I ended up talking to him about Islam, and I got his number, and he's very, very interested in Islam, and inshallah, very, very close to becoming Muslim. So I would encourage you guys to meet with Brother Waqas and help with that in any way that you can. Whether that means volunteering your time, whether that means with donations, with anything else. It's a very, very important community to support, and it's a very, very beautiful initiative. And there's a beautiful story. This is Hadith number 6 in Sahih Bukhari, in Kitab al-Wahi, in the Kitab on the beginnings of revelation. And Abu Sufyan, who is not Muslim at the time, he talks to one of the rulers of Rome. And the rulers of Rome says, who is this man, and what is he? Who is this man who's claiming prophethood? And one of the questions that the ruler of Rome says, he says, who are his initial followers? And Abu Sufyan, he says his initial followers are the poor and downtrodden of society. And the ruler says, surely this man is a prophet. Because he says the prophets, their first followers are always the poor and the downtrodden. So in doing dawah in America, the most fertile grounds are these communities that are struggling financially, economically, socially. So it's very, very important that we as Muslims support these initiatives. And we'll close out with that. And we ask Allah to make us people of knowledge. Ya Allah, we ask you to be people who actualize these 3 verses that the Prophet was given. That we are people of knowledge, that we are people of tazkiyah, and we are people who, upon protecting those 2 things, become people of dawah in our very existence and in our everyday mundane actions.